but of course there were people that needed to be experimented on, and they used those with certain genetics and political affiliations. And as you mentioned, my family background with the Soviet Union gave me, if you will, a standout for the selection, and I was used in that project from 1970 to 1983. It also involved genetic manipulation, time travel, esoteric weaponry, and of course psychic warfare.
Now, you, in one of the talks I watched on YouTube, you have so much stuff up there. People go there and check out everything Stewart has to say. But in a talk you said basically all civilizations have used mind control of some kind. And one of the things that blew me away was this notion of tattoos being part of that. How is that?
Well, that's very interesting because every symbol, every color has a frequency. So if you embed a frequency or archetype with a color into the human energy field via, let's say, a tattoo, then that frequency is embedded in the psychic structure and the energetic structure permanently. So, for example, if you remember, Charles Manson had a swastika tattooed on his forehead, and that was the kind of symbol that he wanted to portray and embed in his subconscious mind, actually.
Now, all these kids today, I mean, you see people, literally their whole bodies, girls even with big tattoos on their arms and their backs and everything. What does that say about our society now?
Well, unfortunately, if you look at those tattoos, they're not very pleasant. A lot of them involve weapons, blood, all kinds of terrible symbolisms, and that is showing that our society is unfortunately leaning towards the satanic or demonic side, and that is a precursor to the New World religion, which is about to be imposed on the earth.
When we come back, we'll continue with you and get into something called Project Blue Beam, which I know you know a lot about. And we'll be right back with Stewart Swerdlow.
Welcome back to Matrix TV News. Still to come, more with Stewart Swerdlow, former secret government mentalist and clairvoyant.
Stewart has recently returned from an expedition to the Antarctic with shocking information about Fourth Reich underground bases on that continent.
And is there a global program in existence right now that connects time travel and the complete control of all of our minds? Sound far-fetched? Well, maybe not. We'll ask Stewart.
And still to come, our own Jerry Day is back with a darker segment tonight called Big Brother is telling you climate worship. But first, Stewart Swerdlow returns right after this.
Mornings before that tonight, Norwegian authorities are investigating strange lights seen in the Arctic sky. The spiraling white light was seen for several minutes Wednesday morning. Locals say the light appeared to be bigger than the moon. Thousands of Norwegians bombarded the Meteorological Institute to ask what that light could have possibly been. Some feared it could have been a meteor, others a black hole, and there are even those that thought it could be aliens. But defense experts in Oslo suggest it is more likely than a failed Russian missile launched from the area of the White Sea. They think a rocket probably went out of control and self-destructed. There's been no official comment, though, from the Russian military.
Now, that's quite the video about this blue beam or some kind of spiral light in Norway. What is that all about, Stewart?
Well, the interesting thing about that particular piece that you have is that it shows an object reflected in the lights over Norway. And that object looks very much like a satellite. Now, I have been stating for years and talking about the Blue Beam Project, which actually was tested in 1961 in Havana Harbor, when U.S. submarines surfaced just off the coast and projected an image of the Virgin Mary over the city of Havana in the hopes of swaying the people there into overthrowing the communist regime.
I did not know they did that.
Image of the Virgin Mary. What, like a holographic image?
Yes, sir. It was beamed right into the sky over Havana Harbor. It was close to around 11 p.m. midnight at the time. It was in 1961. And that was the very first documented testing of the Blue Beam Project. So you can see that this technology is quite old.
world.
So if they were doing that,
Man, what can they
1961,
do
think
now?
about what they. You know, I've always thought, Stuart, though, that they could do anything in the sky. I mean, I've been following this for a while too. They could make it look like an alien invasion, or
Well, that's exactly correct, and that's what they're planning.
or that Jesus was coming.
Well, that's also correct, and they're planning that as well. And that's all part of what they're calling end-time programming. And you know, even recently, in fact, twice in the last 18 months, the Vatican has specifically stated that aliens exist and that, in fact, the ETs are our brothers in Christ. So that's a big change there, and, of course, preparing everyone for what religious changes are coming, and even intergalactic changes are coming for the Earth.
Wow, think of the possibilities here. You know, some dark faction of the elite government puts Jesus up in the sky, and people fall to their knees, and
Well, and there's also this whole thing about the Maitreya right now.
Total control of the planet.
They're talking about this Maitreya, who's supposed to be the Christ consciousness, the Buddha, the Muhammad. So is that part of this, Stewart, where they're going to come out and say that this man is, in fact, the reincarnation of all these?
Well, as a matter of fact, what they're going to do is have, as Richard mentioned, a staged alien invasion, which will lead to a staged second coming of Christ. Now, interestingly, this Blue Beam project is developed in such a way that now these holographic images can actually be felt, picked up on radar, and heard with sound, so that they can hear explosions. You can feel a body as if it was real, even though it's a holographic image.
Wow.
Imagine, if you will, those of you who have seen the Star Trek shows where they had the holodeck, where they interacted with these projections that looked and felt real. That's exactly what this Blue Beam project is like.
Yeah.
And so they will even create a cloned being who they will portray as the Christ. They will match his DNA with the DNA that is found in the Shroud of Turin, which recently has also been proven to be correct by Israeli scientists at Hebrew University, who verified its authenticity, despite other claims against that. And so, yes, they will have this New World religion. The new Christ will proclaim the New World Order as his new holy empire. And, of course, matches the DNA of the Shroud. You have these images that look real. Who could say it's not true?
Wow.
Jeez. So if they want to, if they do this, to what end, though? I always go back to this.
To what
What's
end?
the purpose?
Complete control, right?
That is correct. You know, the very first mind control on the earth was religion, where people were told they were not allowed to communicate directly with God because they were inferior. They needed an intermediary, and so all of religions developed this way of getting to God through the religious leaders. And, of course, Christianity had the epitome of it all, the Christ figure, and no one could get through God except through him.
I just had a thought here. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if they put a 10-mile-high Jesus in the sky, and beamed it everywhere on the planet, and if they could make it speak to the people of Earth, you'd really get them that way, wouldn't you?
Well, what I feel they're going to do is have the image of Christ, Buddha, Muhammad, Moses, any religious figure you can imagine. They will be transmitted in the areas where those religions are popular, and then they will merge them together into one figure and claim that that is really the aspect of God that all must worship. The New World religion will be imposed on the earth, and there will be no alternative to it.
This is really fascinating.
Wow, we talked, when we started this whole thing, we talked about Norway, and you were just in another cold place that made me think cold, Antarctica. Did you find anything that we should know about down there?
Oh, my goodness, you need a whole show on that one. But yes, we did connect to an underground base in Antarctica, which was actually built by the Third Reich back in 1938 to 1944, where they proclaimed they were building an underground paradise for the Fuhrer. They used materials from South Africa and South America, and it was completed in 44. 1945, caravans of submarines and ships from Germany left towards Antarctica filled with Aryan-type people, all blonde, blue-eyed people, male and female. And then they were never heard from again. Now, in 1946, 1 year after the end of World War II, both the British and the Americans sent fleets of Air Force and Navy to Antarctica for some type of battle, but they never said with whom. And when you go to Antarctica, and we stopped in British bases, Ukrainian bases, Argentinian bases, on the listing for the base, it says that they were there to monitor the enemy. They never said who the enemy was.
Right. Well, I did see sort of a directional sign. I believe
it was a joke.
Was it a joke?
Yeah. Well, it was in the base, but somebody there had a sense of humor.
An arrow was pointed at me. That's
right. Yeah. Well,
but
listen,
yes, there is a huge underground base that it's referred to by the Fourth Reich as Neuschwabenland.
Stuart, let's pick it up here when we come back from the break.
And also, we've got to talk about what's happening with these things around the sun.
Yeah.
We'll be right back.
We're going to show some videotape on this as well. You're not going to believe what's hovering around our own sun. Stewart Swerdlow, we'll be right back.
We just saw footage from NASA of this weird stuff going on around the sun. It looks like some kind of circular objects. Do you know what they are?
Yes, I do.
Oh boy, what?
And you know, NASA claims it's the result of problems with their equipment. But, you know, if you look at my DVDs on simultaneous existence, I state in there that all universes, parallel universes, are connected. In one universe, a black hole pulls in energy and releases it in another universe as a star. So a star in one universe is a black hole in another, and vice versa. And that is how energy is balanced between all of creation and all the parallel universes. And advanced civilizations that know how to use this and can survive the transport between these two types of stars and black holes use the stars to exit into a universe in order to travel between them. What we are seeing here in that video are the exits of huge ships traveling interdimensionally from one universe into our universe, using the star as a gate, if you will, as an entry point. That is what is shown there on that video, which basically verifies what I said in my DVDs.
Wow. So any idea if they're with any kind of positive or negative influence on us? Are they here to see us by any chance, or are they just kind of hanging out?
Well, another part of what I've been talking about recently is what's going on in the Kuiper's Belt. And our solar system has been surrounded by huge vehicles, which have been actually mentioned on CNN, BBC, AOL News for the last 2 years. In fact, almost every day they had been reporting a new object seen. This one is moving, that one's moving. And then all of a sudden they dropped it. And then in order to cover the story, make people not too suspicious, they said, you know what? The planet Pluto is really part of that group of objects in the Kuiper's Belt, so it's really just normal. And in fact, Pluto's not a planet anymore, it's something else. If you remember that whole
that was
debacle.
Silly. Yeah, that whole thing about Pluto not being a planet anymore.
Right, and to this day we don't know what they classified it as, but it was just a cover so that people would not pay attention to what's going on out there. these objects that we see exiting the sun are connected to the Kuiper Belt. There is a real fleet out there that's been massing for the last 2 years, and it has intentions that no one knows about. But I can only tell you that in order for a group like that to create such a massive fleet, obviously they have something in mind, and it isn't howdy neighbor.
It's like a real life Independence Day.
It is, but you know what? The powers that be on this planet, the Illuminati, are a bit concerned about that, because I know that that group out there has affected the Hadron Collider in CERN in Switzerland,
right?
Which is why they shut it down twice already. The second time they didn't publicize it.
Right.
And there's a lot going on, interference from out there, and my feeling is towards the second half or end of 2010, we're going to see a lot more news about that on conventional stations.
Now, another thing, because we only have a couple minutes left, somewhere in your site, or perhaps we got an email saying that there is something changing with the climate. Is there an ice age coming?
Absolutely. In fact, Russian scientists have determined that we're entering an ice age that will last for a minimum of 100,000 years. The U.S. Navy has done tests and have determined we're entering what they claim to be a mini ice age to last a minimum of 60 years. But certainly when it snows in Cape Town and Los Angeles and Buenos Aires, etc., that is not global warming.
No.
The Russians really have been saying this for a long time, Stewart.
Now, how?
Right, and they are correct. We are entering an ice age.
So besides this coming up, do you see anything else? I mean, you can time travel, not physically, right? You do it with your mind. Is it kind of like remote viewing?
Yes, and I can teach anyone how to do that. That's what I do in my classes. You know, we only utilize 10% or less of our brain capacity.
Right.
If you learn to use the other 90%, or at least a portion thereof, there are many things you can accomplish.
Stewart, how do people find out more? Your website is?
Expansions.com.
All right, and all the information about how to get your products is there, right?
And also the classes, and you can actually, one of the things that I would like to have done is to find out where we should be geographically, because you can also help people choose where is the best place for them, right?
Absolutely. I do geographic locators where I take the frequency and I plug it in basically to where on the earth you fit the best and match the most.
Stewart, I would one day just love to sit down and talk with you for a week. That's how I feel.
In all of our mutual spare time. Thanks so much,
lot,
Stewart.
Well, thank you very much.
Real pleasure having you here. Good night. Listen, stay tuned for Matrix TV's Jerry Day with another segment coming up called Big Brother is Telling You, Climate Worship. Good timing, huh?
Yeah.
Quite a segment. Stay tuned.